Hi, my name is Jeff Stone. I'm with the Kiwanis Club of Manhasset, Port Washington, and I'm president of Project Help Long Island. Uh, we're here with a special guest, a clinician, a friend, a board member of Project Help Long Island, and she's also a licensed clinical social worker. Her name is Nicole Sullivan. She owns a group psychotherapy practice and is licensed in multiple states. As a project, as a board member for Project Help Long Island, she offers her expertise in substance misuse as well as mental health issues. And she has completed a specialization in trauma and substance use. She works for the Institute of Adolescent Trauma Treatment and Training, in addition to private practice and at Stony Brook University. So I would like to welcome Nicole Sullivan here to speak on substance misuse. And we'll go from there. Welcome, Nicole. Nice having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Jeff. We're just going to spend a couple of minutes tonight together, but at the end of this, I will make sure that you all have my contact information, as well as some resources that may be of help to you all. So I just wanted to start out by sharing some brief statistics around substance use and misuse. About 27 million, and actually these numbers have gone up since the pandemic, Americans over the age of 12 have used an illegal substance in the past 30 days, and over 130 million Americans over the age of 12 reported lifetime use of any illegal substance, with almost 50 million reporting use in the past year. The statistics, I'm not going to read them one at a time, but you will have access to the slides, are just astounding. Millions and millions and millions of Americans struggle with substance misuse. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it tonight. And so the two statistics that I did really want to highlight, every couple of years, the United States sends out a survey nationally to citizens across the country. And the last one that they did was in 2016. We're due for another one. And that survey found that approximately 8% of children or adolescents aged 12 and older had a diagnosable substance use disorder related to their use of alcohol or other substances in the past year. That's a huge number. That's almost 10% of adolescents who truly, truly are struggling. And then there are many, many who do not necessarily have a diagnosis because they haven't connected with a professional. Among those who had an illegal drug use disorder, the most common disorder was for marijuana. I think we all know, at least in New York, the legalization of marijuana has changed things, but I share some statistics just to highlight the scope and scale of the problem that we're facing. Another key point to really hone in, and this is true across all age gaps, is that unfortunately only about 1 in 12 people receive treatment for their substance use. One in 10, excuse me. That's 10%. 10% of people receive treatment. There are 90% of people, unfortunately, who do not get treatment. And so if you or your loved one or someone who you know is able to link to care, that's an amazing thing, and they would be part of the 10%. We really need to get the message out there that help is available and hopefully increase the number of people who utilize services. Now, my other last piece is that mental health and substance use often go hand in hand. So as people struggle with their underlying mental health, they're more likely to cope with substances in a variety of ways. And you'll notice there is a huge, huge overlap between individuals who struggle with mental health and those who struggle with a substance use disorder. Now, a couple of other quick points. The American Society for Addiction Medicine says that Addiction itself is a primary and chronic disease of brain reward motivation, memory, and related circuitry, and that dysfunction in these circuits leads to characteristic biological, psychological, social, and spiritual manifestations. Really, what does that mean? In a nutshell, it means that as a person continues to struggle with substance misuse and as their use progresses, it really does create very real brain changes that affect someone psychologically, biologically, socially, and spiritually. That's the definition by the American Society of Addiction Medicine. There are others out there, but I share the statistics and the information to say that many, many people start out, and we're going to talk about it in a slide or two, but with substance misuse that ultimately progresses into abuse, into a full substance use disorder. There is something that we call risky use, and those really are the folks that perhaps if someone had spoken to them about the dangers of their substance use, or someone had intervened when they were younger, it might not have progressed into a full addictive disorder. And there are many, many resources out there for people that are perhaps using substances in a risky or problematic way, but who may not necessarily have a full addiction. And we're going to talk about that. So this is the typical progression of substance use. And for many, many people, that happens during adolescence. And so what you'll see in the top left is abstinence, where people don't engage in any substance use at all. And that use progresses into experimental use, typically in adolescence and teen years. That starts with the first use of alcohol or other substances. And as that use is repeated over time, it transitions into non-problematic use, where people are able to indulge in alcohol, marijuana, or other substances, but not necessarily have negative consequences. As the youth or individual begins to experience negative consequences, that feeds into problematic use, which ultimately feeds into abuse, dependence, and ideally recovery, abstinence, treatment, and wellness. But what I want you to take note of is that it is a progression, and that over time, like any other disease, the disease of addiction does get worse without treatment. Now, I just wanted to show these pieces and these slides for visuals on two things. One is you have some folks who don't use any mind-altering substances at all. And then you have much of the population that does stay within social, recreational, and regular use. And then you have a segment of the population that, unfortunately, for various reasons, progresses into a substance use disorder. If you look down here, this is the percent of the population that's age 12 and up by their substance use. So if you look at adolescents in particular, there really is 14, almost 15% that are using substances in what we would classify as a non-risky way, but almost 32% and 16%, almost half, that are using in a risky kind of way, or that would be criteria for a full addiction. And so that really is a very large subset of folks, and this data is out of Columbia University, that the idea is that we spread the information, link to those people, and encourage them to get care and or work on their mental health if they are using perhaps in a non-risky way, because maybe it doesn't have to progress into a risky use or into an addiction. Same thing, just to highlight that it is a progression, right? And so you have people that use casually or in a non-problematic way. Perhaps that tends to progress for some folks into a problematic use. And that is defined as use that begins to have negative consequences. Maybe they've gotten their first DWI, maybe they're binging occasionally, That is problematic use where somebody starts to begin to have the negative consequences. And that feeds into chronic dependence, which is a use that has become habitual or ongoing despite negative health consequences. The next part, I just want to talk about, I think a lot of us get a lot of information around substance use, and maybe perhaps some people don't, but if your loved one or someone you know is struggling, really, how do you know? What does that look like? And I'm going to give you the 11 criteria that mental health professionals or physicians across the United States, we all use the same 11 criteria to determine whether or not a substance use disorder is in fact present. So, one is, does the person take the substance in larger amounts or over a longer period of time than they set out to do? Did the person go to the bar and say, I'm going to have one glass and I'll be home by 6? And did they come home at 8? That's criteria 1. Criteria 2 is persistent desire or an unsuccessful attempt to cut down or control their use. Have they tried to cut down or stop and been unsuccessful? 3, do they spend a great deal of time in activities necessary to obtain the substance? Meaning, are they working for money a lot of the time to fuel that substance use the substance, or recover from the effects of the substance? Are they having cravings or a strong desire to use the substance? Are they failing to fulfill major role obligations at work, school, or home? If they're a student, are they present in school? If they're a partner or a parent, are they present for the kids? 6, is continued use despite having ongoing problems, whether that's interpersonally with their family or friends or in other settings. 7, important social, occupational, or recreational activities are given up or reduced because of their use. They used to love to play basketball. They don't play basketball anymore. They used to love to hang out with their friends. They don't hang out with their friends anymore. 8 is reoccurrent use where it is physically hazardous. By definition, driving under the influence is physically hazardous. 9, continued use despite having knowledge that their mental health may be implicated by the use. 10 is tolerance, meaning does someone need more and more to get the same effect? And finally, 11 is withdrawal, which is manifested by either withdrawal syndrome, which needs medical attention. And if you're unsure, I would always check with your physician. Or if they use the substance, do they feel better physically? So those are the 11 criteria that is utilized across the United States by all mental health professionals, all physicians, all providers to determine whether or not a substance use disorder is present. Out of the 11, you only need 2 to have a substance use disorder. It can change based on the substance, right? So I've worked with people that number 2, 5, and 7 is present for alcohol, but 11, 10, 1, and 4 is present for opioid use. So it is dependent on the substance, but out of the 11, you only need 2 in order to have a substance use disorder. And I say that to say that there are tons of folks that might not yet meet any of those 11 criteria, but that still could be linked to care and helped in many, many ways, because maybe we don't have to wait for it to get to a substance use disorder to intervene. And so there are a bunch of different classifications of substances. I'm not going to go in depth into them, but the slide does highlight the withdrawal symptoms associated. So if you see your loved one, for example, sweating, having panic attacks, sleep problems, tremors, that would be indicative perhaps of a withdrawal syndrome associated with Ativan, Xanax, or Valium. Marijuana, synthetic marijuana, K2 spice, is a different subset of withdrawal symptoms. cocaine or amphetamine withdrawal, sleepiness, muscle pain, anxiety, tremors, low mood, and sometimes suicidal thoughts. So if your loved one is experiencing symptoms that seem out of the ordinary, and you may be aware that they have a history of substance use, maybe not, link with a provider and they'll help guide you and do some digging around withdrawal, because some withdrawal can be life-threatening and does require medical attention. My last piece for you all really is, what are the signs and symptoms of somebody who may be misusing substances? And so some of the things that you may see are changes in their appearance. They may begin to look disheveled. They may not, but changes in appearance, weight loss, weight gain, looking disheveled, perhaps changes in hygiene, which we'll talk about. Changes in sleeping pattern, also huge. Are they up at night and sleeping during the day? Oftentimes, changes in sleeping patterns are huge for us in the field of mental health, because they really are your body's sound system and alarm system when something is not quite right. Changes in appetite, are they eating more or significantly less? Also something to keep an eye on. And poor hygiene. Those are just some warning signs and symptoms for you all to maybe perhaps visually see if someone in your life or someone that you know is struggling and or exhibits any of these symptoms. Changes in behavior, changes in friend group, mood swings, increased irritability, depression are all signs and symptoms that substance misuse may be going on. My last piece for you all really is that help is available, and that the sooner somebody is connected to care, the better the outcomes. There are millions of therapists across the United States, many of whom specialize in substance use or other areas that may be important to the person in your life. I will leave you all with 988, which is the National Crisis Hotline for mental health around the country. It is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for anyone to call. And SAMHSA.gov is the federal website that you can go on, type in your zip code, and it will pull up a list of treatment providers in the area around you for you or your loved one who may be struggling with substance misuse. So thank you all for listening. I will share the PowerPoint with Jeff, and hopefully it is of help to you all tonight.
Well, I want to thank you, Nicole Sullivan, for speaking on substance misuse, substance disorder. Very important in today's world. Again, a lot of good information there. And as part of the mental health initiative, we'll roll this out along with topics underneath the mental health umbrella. But this is a wonderful first start, and we hope to do this as often as possible. Again, thank you, Nicole, for agreeing to speak on tonight's topic. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll say goodbye. All right. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
All right. There we go.